My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist and, television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timmy Dakolo and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News for everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news. Souq News is your station.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
energy or whatever kind of oil-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is in no disrespect to anybody, it's abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
yes, it's another beautiful day. Thank God it's Friday. So it's often been said, in this climate, it's Friday where we'll do all the conversation. It's another time for us to look at issues related to business, finance, national development, even global issues and the economy. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. Today, we'll center our conversation around the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State. He was in Nigeria on Wednesday, and he made some statements as regards to business relations between U.S. and Africa. We're going to look at some of the commitments that the United States government has made to Africa. We're also going to look at the responsibility and some of the functions of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. We're going to do a spotlight on that commission and what Nigerians need to know about the activities of this commission. And when it comes to the issue of public revenue and the management of public revenue, what we need to know. Don't forget, you can be part of this conversation. It's your program. This implies that your voice needs to be heard. And that is possible if you can go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page, using the hashtag Early Exchange. Yeah, I'm not alone. Blessing is also set to give you the best of programming this morning. Blessing, how are you today?
I'm good, and you're right about that, as it's what we do every morning here, and we thank you so much for being a part of it. This is the Friday edition of Early Exchange, and it's going to be a recap of major stories that made headlines in the course of the week globally and, of course, locally. Now, he's talked about one of them, the visit of U.S. Secretary Blinken, and what that means for Nigeria and other African countries that he would be visiting as well. So stay tuned to the show. Let's take you now to the news studio so you can be abreast of recent happenings. Grace Kumalafe is standing by to give you the news updates. Hello, Grace.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi.
My name is Etemari Glover. Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
Hello and welcome to News Update. I am Grace Komolafe. Despite economic challenges, the Nigerian Naira demonstrated resilience in both official and parallel market yesterday. According to data from the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, NAFEM, the official exchange rate showed a 2.12% depreciation, closing at 900.96 Naira to a dollar at the close of business. This represented a 18.72 Naira loss, or a 2.12% decrease compared to the previous day's closing of 88.24 Naira. The intraday high and low at 1,399 Naira per $1 and 789 Naira per $1 respectively indicated a noteworthy spread of 610 Naira per dollar. Furthermore, NAFEM reported a remarkable 103.52% increase in forex turnover at the day's close, totaling $115.19 million. Meanwhile, the parallel market reported a record low for the Naira at 1,410 Naira per dollar, reflecting a 3.29% or 45 Naira decrease from the previous day's closing rate of 1,365 Naira. In a bid to address the budget deficit in the country, the Tunisia cabinet has green-lighted a bill permitting the central bank to fund the treasury boards. This bill has generated concerns about the bank's autonomy. Tunisia President Kais Saied had advocated for a review to allow direct budget financing through state bond purchases, a stance cautioned against by Central Bank Governor Marouane Abbassi. Economics speculate that the bill's approval raises the likelihood of Abbassi departing from his 6-year term concluded next month. Critics fear increased state intervention in monetary policies, citing the fiscal deficit, financial resource scarcity, and challenges in foreign borrowing. The bill's anticipated parliamentary approval in the coming weeks aligns with the government's increased need for external loans, reaching around $5 billion in the 2024 budget. Algerian Central Bank Credit Populaire Algerian has announced its intention to open 30% of its capital for private investment, as outlined in the statement yesterday. The state-owned bank specified that its share is valued at approximately 2,500 Algerian dinars, with plans to sell 60 million shares. The partial privatization initiative forms a crucial part of Algerian broader strategy to monetize its banking sector, fostering increased capacity for financing investment and driving economic growth. Notably, State Bank currently holds a dominant position, representing about 95% of total bank asset and loan portfolios in Algeria. Brazilian airline Gol4.sa has formally filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States, marking another instance of debt restructuring for the carrier, which has been impacted by reduced air traffic due to COVID and delays in Boeing deliveries, ending the third quarter with approximately $4.07 billion in gross debt. Gol has secured $550 million in financing from bondholders within its holding Abra Group. This move follows a trend among Latin American carriers seeking bankruptcy protection post-COVID, with Avianca, Mexico's Aeromexico, and Chile-based LATAM Airlines taking similar steps. Gold CEO Kelso Ferrer noted that the decision aims to establishing an optimal capital structure to navigate aviation industry challenges and cope with pandemic-induced economic effects. The primary objective, according to Ferrer, is to reduce the company's leverage with no plans to scale bank airline operations. And lastly, Britain has halted discussions on a free trade agreement with Canada, citing discontent on both sides regarding limited access to agricultural markets. The talk, initiated in March 2022, were part of Britain's post-European Union departure effort as it sought new trade deals globally. Canadian Trade Minister Mary Ng, spokeswoman, expressed disappointment, noting that the UK's instance on maintaining market access barriers for the agricultural sector and reluctance to reach a mutual agreement has led to pause in negotiations. Canadian farmers, hindered by regulation prohibiting hormone use, voiced grievances about restricted entry into the British beef market. Total bilateral trade between them amounted to $32.9 billion in the year ending June 30, 2023, with Canada being Britain's 18th largest trading partner, as reported by British official data, while Canadian data indicated that bilateral trade accounted for just 2.7% of the total in 2022. Thank you for joining us on News Update. Now it's over to Femi Ayodele and Blessing Eiche for more conversation on early exchange. I am Grace Komalafe. Good morning.
All right, thank you, Grace, for doing what you know best, which is to take us around the world with news update. And now we'll go on a short break. When we return, our conversation on the U.S.-African partnership will kick off. Stay with us.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Marse Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamaze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, is a bismarck. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy.
advancing development.
All right, it's the Early Exchange, and don't forget it's your program. For you to be part of this conversation, just go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page. What's your view as regards the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State to Nigeria? He had a tour and he had to visit 4 African countries. It was a turn up Nigeria on Wednesday, where he had meetings with the president and some prominent Nigerians, talking about some of the promises or commitments he made to Nigeria. Africa remains a strategic partner when it comes to the business relations that exist between the U.S. and this continent. Why is Africa of interest to the United States? These are things we're going to look at. And then looking at this visit, what will be the impact of this visit, the economic impact, and some of the promises, the commitment United States made to Nigeria. Blessing, before we bring in our guests, there are several people in some quarters who, for every action, there are always different interpretations to it. The first reaction about this visit was that why will the U.S. Secretary of State will visit Nigeria, embark on a visit to 4 countries called the African Tour? Why will he embark on this kind of tour at a sensitive time like this? Some brought about political connection to it as regards the timing. But for me, if you look at the kind of volume of businesses that exists between U.S. and Africa, it's an age-long relationship, the kind of bilateral relationship that exists between them. Africa remains a strategic partner. In fact, especially Nigeria will remain one of the most significant trade partners. In fact, when he visited Nigeria, he described Nigeria as one of the most innovative countries in the world, whereby the essence of the visit is to ensure that they strengthen the relationship between U.S. and Africa. It's also an offshoot of the summit that happened in 2022, in December 2022, the U.S.-African Summit, where it's also important for the United States to extend the hands of fellowship to some of its strategic partners. I wasn't surprised that when he visited Nigeria, he made some commitments. He said that the American entrepreneurs are interested in investing in Nigeria, especially in the tech sector. It has been of interest to them. Even though he highlighted some challenges, the issue of corruption, the issue of repatriation of funds, which we know it has been a critical issue, where foreign companies who are in Nigeria have not been able to repatriate some of their funds, and I'm quite sure the CBN is handling that. But in spite of these challenges, he said that the U.S. is also ready to provide some support when it comes to the issue of security. And that was why he pledged the $45 million, security fund to assist Nigeria and some of the West African countries. He also raised concerns about the coup that you have in Mali, Burkina Faso, and what the West African nations need to do to ensure that democracy is restored, and also showed the interest of the United States in offering the necessary diplomatic support to ensure that military rule doesn't become the order of the day in those countries. So for you, what was the high point for you?
Well, picking 4 countries out of in Africa to visit them, there's no high point for me, basically, but the fact that the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, chooses to visit 4 countries in Africa. Now, it's strategic, and I guess it's for different reasons. Now, the priorities, like he has mentioned, security, health, and economic development, these are very key to development of a region. Now, you understand that Nigeria and so many other African countries have been battling with security challenges. So the U.S. coming into partnership with African countries, which they've tried before and which they've made arrangements to have more concrete relationships before during the leadership summit that was held before in 2020. And then Blinken also recalled that there were some setbacks, so they couldn't pursue with some of the things that were discussed. But this time around, coming to talk about security, I think it's much needed right now, offering funds and all, but the part of the US being interested in investing in the tech sector. For me, I'd say that's a high point of it, or that's the high point for me, because tech is the way, is where the world is going right now. And so if they're investing and they're picking out tech, it's a good one, because they are among the front runners when it comes to that sector. So it's going to be a good one. But for the security aspect, I don't think that giving of funds is enough. It should be more of intel than funds, because I don't think funds is actually the problem. Intelligence gathering and some expertise that the US have in dealing with insecurity should also be extended to Nigeria. Remember a time when the Boko Haram insurgency was starting, and it was getting to a point where almost every time you hear, oh, bomb blast here, kidnapper, and Nigerians were asking that the federal government should seek help from the US. And at one point, it seemed like, oh, some troops of the some UN troops actually came in. So it's not just funds. Give them money to handle the security issues. What role will they play in providing support? If it's intelligence they're going to provide, if it's ammunition, whatever it is in that regard. But it's quite appreciated, and I like the fact that, yes, when we talked about this some days ago, some political undertone were around it, yes, but it's a win for Africa in any way. Whether there are political undertones or not, there are wins for Africa. And I think that the African countries that he's visiting, that the US wants to solidify bilateral relationships with, should position themselves well and dialogue well. Don't dialogue from the point of disadvantage to say, okay, whatever it is they are offering, we're ready to take. It should be negotiation from the point of advantage.
For me, the timing doesn't negate the necessity of the motive, yes, or the necessity of the relationship or the partnership. For those who are reading political connection, well, they might have their say. But for me, I think the business relations, have more impact than the political connection, because if it outweighs the merit outweighs the demerit. And if you look at the kind of commitment in the area of health, the United States has committed about $8.5 billion in the last 5 years when it comes to the prevention of HIV, tuberculosis, and to enhance the war against HIV in Nigeria and in Africa. So if a particular country is making that kind of commitment over the years, then you know that it's not a joke, it's not a tea party. And for them to have been able to send their representative to these African countries to show the level of interest and the keen interest they have in facilitating this kind of partnership. And so for us as a nation, I think what we need to do, even if we are being given funds, that's not a bad idea. In fact, some of our challenges, even if you're being given funds, ammunitions in terms of in tackling the issue of security, I don't think that's the challenge. It is what we'll do with it, which is quite important. And in recent times, our president has shown a form of sincerity to show that when it comes to the issue of security, he's ready to tackle it headlong. And due to his recent visits to some of these countries, to cement this kind of relationship with some of these countries and to show the sincerity of governance, which is part of what strengthening investors' confidence. We look at the performance of our stock market. We talked about it yesterday. It's a result of the activities of the federal government in recent time and some of the commitments they've made. And so with this kind of visit, it's also strategic. It's like a PR for Nigeria to tell the world that there's something significant about Nigeria. And for those who feel visiting Nigeria is like going to the den of a lion, now they can erase their mind if the US...
He's going to take word back to the US of his visits to Nigeria and what he's saying, what he thinks. So that's... to a good extent will boost investor confidence. If you have your Secretary of State telling you about the country you want to invest in, then that's some level of assurance.
That's great. All right, let's go on a short break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation as regards the partnership between the US and Africa. Stay with us.
Broad Street. Broad Street, situated in Lagos Island, is steeped in Nigerian history. Once the biggest financial hub of the country, it housed the headquarters of major banks, linked to CBN, the stock exchange, and the lows of lender companies. Broad Street is a historically significant street. It has played a central role in the development of Lagos and history, an important commercial and administrative center for the British colonial authorities. It was also a home to some of the city's earliest modern buildings. Broad Street was a residential area in the pre-colonial era. With the British came the Methodist Boys High School in 1878 and the Broad Street Prison in 1882, renamed Freedom Park. The General Hospital, which was a British military hospital, was built in 1893, being the first general hospital in Nigeria. The old British Secretariat building, which is now the Federal Ministry of Justice, was built in 1906. Broad Street has seen a full turn into modern commercial office blocks, complexes, skyscrapers, and markets from the outer marina through Akpombo, early into the Adeniji-Adele Road. Broad Street is one of the busiest streets in Nigeria on weekdays, where commercial activities take place day and night. From modern buildings to ancient structures, this street gives one a raw dose of life in Lagos. Broad Street is often referred to as Lagos Financial District. It boasts a mix of architectural styles, reflecting its long history, colonial-era buildings, Victorian and Edwardian architectural features, alongside more modern skyscrapers and structures. Broad Street remains a vital, vibrant part of the Nigerian economy. Broad Street. Souq Enlightenment.
Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade, and later under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an armed forces remembrance cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking at their final destination. Idumota Market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota Market. Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, is abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's the Early Exchange. Our job here is to shape policy and advance development with our conversation. That's why we'll be looking at the partnership that exists between the U.S. and Africa in respect to the visit of the United States Secretary of State Blinken, who was in Nigeria on Wednesday. He made some commitments, he made some pledges as regards some funds and the need to give some strategic partnership to Nigeria. What does this imply for Nigeria and the economy? To help us, review this, we are being joined by a special guest. We have Dr. Ken Nkewa with us. He's a business and public policy analyst, also a lecturer at the Department of Business at the University of Lagos. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to Early Exchange.
Thank you so much.
All right. Let's start the conversation by looking at the business relations that exist between U.S. and Africa, which resulted to the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State. He took African tour to 4 African countries. Why do you think it's significant to have this kind of visit around this time, and what could be the impact to these countries?
It's good that we're having this coming at this point in time, but we have to be quite holistic in our analysis of why such a visit should be coming in. So there are different dimensions to it, and I, in my usual character, would not be biased because I look out for the interest of my country, our country, Nigeria, just like I know the Secretary of State will be looking out for the interest of his own country. But let's focus on the positives that come with this, and let's also not run away from the reason why we're having this at this point in time. Now, let us start with the fact that there is a new scramble for Africa. And the competition is between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. Russia, China are gaining entry into Africa, and it would appear that some Western countries are losing out, i.e. America and very notably France. So it is important that this kind of visits are coming now, especially at the beginning of the year, and particularly because the American country is going into an election year, for there to be a renegotiation of relationships, for there to be how we can start looking at forging, like Blinken did say, what can we do with Africa, no longer what we can do for Africa. So I think there is the reawakening, there is the renaissance that is going on within the sub-Saharan African continent, and some countries are beginning to come into their own, and they can no longer be neglected. Now, as it concerns Nigeria, Nigeria happens to be one of the major trading partners of the United States, and it is not a country, being the most populous black nation on earth, that you would want to ignore. And you also find out that some other countries and their business interests, because of the economic situation, not just Nigeria, globally, are getting away or departing or divesting from Nigeria. That opens the door for other American companies to fill that gap. That also leaves a gap for the Eastern Bloc countries, the Russia, the China, and other countries to also fill in the gap. So it is a race to consolidate the economic base. It is a race to renegotiate the partnership that has been there for almost 70 years. And I hope that our administrators, our leaders, will have their hands on the deck to actually scrutinize whatever has been thrown at us and to ensure that they take decisions that are in the best interest of Nigeria and that will boost social efficiency as we go forward. So it's a positive one. The emphasis seemed to have been a visit to come and open a technology center, but those of us that are public analysts know that it is much more than just opening a technology space in Lekki. It is about coming to say, look, we have been age-long friends and we have been allies, so to speak, and we want to remain aligned with our interest in Nigeria and forge that interest and take it deeper.
All right, so what benefit do you think this would bring for the 4 African countries that were picked? So even if there may be reasons that you've given now, there may be motives behind the visits, but what gain does it present for these African countries?
Well, we should look at a lot of economic gains that will be coming in. What we're needing in Nigeria, in Africa, and this selected countries that we visited now, is investments. We need a lot of investments. But I have always reiterated the dichotomy that exists in terms of investments. You have two types of investments. You have the foreign direct investments, and you have the foreign portfolio investments, which are indirect investments. But one thing that we do not get to read too much in the print or in the broadcast media here about is that most of the investments that come into Africa are mostly portfolio investments. So those portfolio investments are indirect. They are not really creating the jobs. They are not really accelerating the economic growth and development that we need. So we should be looking at the interest for Africa and for these countries, but much more emphasizing that, look, come and build factories here. Don't just come and set up a space. Don't just come and put money in some banks. Don't just come and invest in companies that are already in existence. Come and build factories here. Come and do what you did with China, which has also made China a superpower in terms of manufacturing. We need more manufacturing companies. We need more manufacturing plants. We need more investments that are direct, not just chunky projects, not projects that you just put on ground. Once you recover your investment, double of the ROI, like we say in accounting, you move away. So it is not just about identifying or highlighting the benefits. It's about the benefiting countries sitting down to say, this is what we want, this is what is good for us, and we know you have the capacity to deploy that to Africa. So it is having the foresight, having the hindsight, and being ahead of the curve. That's what I think we should be looking at in terms of the benefits for the countries that will be recipients of investment going forward.
All right. According to Blinken, American entrepreneurs are quite interested in the tech sector. They've identified the tech sector in Nigeria as a critical area. Why do you think there's keen interest in the tech sector, and what kind of partnership do you think Nigeria should have with the US when it comes to this sector?
All right, the tech sector is one sector that I take a look at, and sometimes I am not particularly impressed. You may be shocked to hear that, because sometimes when you talk of technology, the first thing that comes to your mind is fintech companies, and the real technology that is supposed to take African countries to space. Nobody is giving us the technical know-how. Nobody is transferring that technology or that knowledge to Africa. So they just give us Wi-Fi and give us some of these things, but that's on a lighter note. Now, when we talk about the technology that we should be anticipating, my problem with technological partnership is that who actually is on the benefiting end? For example, you look at the fintech company, and we have, I think from the last count, we have about 5 unicorns in Nigeria now that are Nigerian-founded companies. But where were those companies registered? These are some of the things we don't take a look at. So I'm not going to mention names, but if they paid us at Souq to advertise them, then I will mention their names. But you have most of these companies that were registered in the US, but you hear are Nigerian fintechs. How do you reconcile that? So I think that the partnership must be renegotiated. And the technology that we're looking at is not technology that is just for subsistence, everyday living. What about the technology that will deliver the rate of development advancement that puts us at par with the Western countries? We need technology, not just in the area of the internet, not in the area of fin technology. We need space technology. We need nuclear technology. We need these technologies that will improve the everyday life of the over 120 million Nigerians that live in abject poverty. Not just for entrepreneurship. It's not just about commerce. It's not just about trade. But what will go down, trickle down, to ameliorating the living conditions in Nigeria and to alleviating the poverty that people are suffering. So when we talk about technology, you hear so many billions of investments. Yet again, it comes to foreign portfolio investments, not actually direct investments. So I want to see a deployment of technology. I want to see a transfer of technology in Nigeria that will, look, let me surprise you. At the last count, we had about 10,000 professors in Nigeria. Real professors across the public universities and the private universities. Now, when you look at the STEM divide, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics divide, it's usually 60-40. So we have, from that number, at least about 6,000 professors in the sciences. And yet, we cannot generate 5,000 megawatts of electricity. Why? Because the technology that we need is not being transferred to us. The knowledge, the basic emphasis that we need is what we are giving, and I don't think it's a call for celebration. So I project a situation whereby we should be asking for complete transfer of technology, and we should be appropriating that technology, not just in the area of fintech, in the internet, but in every other concerted area that will improve the standard of living for Nigerians.
Okay, let's look at some of the key priorities of Anthony Blinken's visit. One of them is to boost security partnerships in Africa. Going by what you said, that African countries should be asking for or should be making negotiations based on what benefits them, not what would be the benefits for the countries. So in this regard, that Blinken or the US is offering some funds to support African countries in terms of security. What should be the response of African countries as the benefiting countries to say, this is what we'd rather have, or this is what we need?
He who pays the piper definitely will dictate the tune. We cannot run away from the fact that the superpowers of the world know where the security lapses in Africa, and especially Nigeria, actually are. Now, I'm emotional about this because when you see what is happening in the country, you weep even though you're not affected. There was a time in our country, I may not answer your question directly, where a particular sitting president actually ran to the United States and pleaded for the sale of arms and ammunition to be able to fight insecurity and fight the restiveness that was occurring in different sections of the country, and there was no positive answer. Why? So if you now come some 5, 6, 7 years after to now tell me that we should be telling you what we need,
so what has changed?
What has changed? It's not about what we need. You know what we need. So if somebody is not benefiting from the insecurity situation in Nigeria, the situation as it stands will not still be in perpetuity. So my appeal is for us to have all hands on the deck to actually sit down. Why do we have this situation as it stands, and what can we do about it? You shouldn't be telling us to come and tell you what we need. We know what is wrong. We know where the problems are. And we know also that we may not even have enough sophisticated technology to fight this insurgency. We also know that the insurgents are also getting their own forms of arms and ammunition that sometimes seem to be more sophisticated than those of the military. So conducting a need analysis shouldn't be the issue. Actually deploring the facts and the data on ground. Because if we actually go into a partnership, a security partnership with the superpowers, I'm sure we can wrest this insecurity situation in Nigeria and bring it to its knees in 2024.
All right. Some of the concerns raised by Blinken is the fact that American entrepreneurs are contending with the issue of corruption and the crisis, surrounding repatriation of funds, in Nigeria. Those are the critical issues he raised. How do you think this could be of threat to foreign investment in a country like Nigeria? And what should the Nigerian authority do when it comes to the issue of corruption and repatriation of funds?
Well, two big elephants in the room. I think one is white, and I don't know if he will agree with me that one may be gray. Okay, so I think I should start with the gray one, since gray doesn't look too bad. Then we'll come to the white, which is corruption. I think the repatriation of funds is a major problem that is hindering the flow of investments into Nigeria, and that is also promoting the threat of divestment away from Nigeria. I've been following the activities of the new central bank governor, and I think that there's a real sincerity of purpose to get us out of this economic conundrum. But I also think that enough is not being done. And I think that the capacity to do what is needed to be done is actually there. Going by the number of barrels of oil we sell on a daily basis, it shouldn't be too hard to make it accessible for companies to actually repatriate their capital back to their host countries. But you see, the problem is more of a socio-economic problem than it is one that we should just, talk about. Socio-economic in the sense that if the will is not there, the way will never be carved. So when you look at that issue, it's very complex. I would want to go into the nitty-gritty and the details about that. That issue in itself has the white elephant in the room playing a role in it, because you have two markets for foreign exchange in Nigeria, for instance, and you will be surprised enriched, albeit without working for it through that process. Now, the second elephant in the room, corruption. There's corruption everywhere. There's corruption everywhere. Quantum of foreign nationals that are do everything possible to get Nigerian visas of that world. And most importantly, the issue should not be an emphasis on corruption. The issue
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godi Odidi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for. And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching Souq News.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, it's a bismarck. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
If you just joined us, this is Early Exchange, and we're looking at the economic implications of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the 4 African countries that he's visiting. And our guest in the studio, Dr. Kenwa, has been exploring some of those implications. Now, before we went on the break, you were on a line of thoughts responding to Blinken's worry of corruption in Nigeria as it may deter some investors.
Yeah, what I did say is that the emphasis on the repatriation of fund has an undertone of corruption behind it, and it is particularly because some people are benefiting from that process. But to also say that corruption is a major hindrance to attracting investments into the country is one point I think I want to beg to disagree with. I think the major problem that could hinder investment into the country and hinder investment within the country is the lack of distributive justice. And what does that mean? It means that a good number of Nigerians, almost 60%, don't have access to the Commonwealth in the ground of Nigeria, on the ground in Nigeria, and the Commonwealth that is being created in Nigeria. That in itself is the major catalyst, okay, that exacerbates the problems of corruption in Nigeria. Now, in sociology, we call it the strain theory. There's a strain. Okay, so I see there's so much around me, like Chinua Achebe did say. How do I have a river at my backyard and then begin to use spit to wash my hands? And then I see even foreigners. I see people that should not even have access to that water, coming to that water to get water, and I don't have access to it. What does that create? It facilitates, it promotes corruption, crime, and other means for people to get by in society. So once we can deal with the problems of distributive justice, you will see that the problems of corruption will abate in the society. And then these issues of repatriation of funds, it will be easily dealt with. That is my theory, and I hope the government will take note of that and try to implement that and see how far we can go. So let people have the basic things of life. That's what Nigerians are asking for. The basic common things, light, water, electricity, good living, things. The rate of inflation is crippling in this country, and then when people try to get by as a result of that, you say it's corruption. It is corruption, but to deal with corruption, we need to address the problems of the lack of distributive justice in the Commonwealth of Nigeria.
All right, let's look at another key priority, which is enhancing health. Now, we understand that in recent times, some pharmaceutical companies have exited Nigeria, and even recently too, the distribution of the malaria vaccine to some African countries, which Cameroon has started the rollout to eradicate malaria from the country. But some of the African countries were not captured. Now, one of them is Nigeria. Maybe subsequently they will be, but for now, they were not captured in that list. So in enhancing health, what should be the focus as the discussions are on with the U.S. Secretary of State from the African countries, Nigeria inclusive, because he just visited Nigeria? What should be the talks in that regard?
Partnership, and partnership. That should be what we should be emphasizing. But away from partnership, I need to state emphatically that I am not a politician, even if I intend to be, maybe in a few years' time. And I do not belong to a political party. I'm not a card-carrying member of any political party. Otherwise, I would not be able to do a fair and unbiased analysis on any public policy issue. Now, but with this present government and with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in the last United Nations General Assembly, I listened to that speech over and over again. And one of the things that he did emphasize is that Africa is not begging. But we have, over the years, been made to put ourselves as beggar nations. We're begging. And the issue should not be addressed to the West or to anybody that is visiting as a visitor. No, the issue comes back to us. We should become introspective and retrospective and throw the light back to us. Now, with respect to the vaccines that have been, invented, created, and have been distributed through supply chains with all the impediments that come with such supply chains. I'll take us back to the COVID era, a little under 4 years ago. It will surprise you that a university in Nigeria was able to come out with a vaccine that could actually, step down the progression of the COVID virus. Another professor in Nigeria, I talked about 10,000 professors that we have in active service, was able to also, with his own natural, I don't know what they call that form of medicine, come out with a vaccine that proved to be potent. What did the government of Nigeria do? They neither encouraged that professor, nor did they encourage that university. That speaks a lot. Why am I bringing this issue up? We should stop depending on the West for our growth, for our progress, for our development, and for our sustainability. Everything we need to address health-related issues, we have the capacity in Nigeria here. I just told you we have 10,000 professors registered at the NUC, recognized by the NUC. And of that 10,000, you have about 60,000, 6,000 or 60% that are in the sciences. So when you talk about coming to Africa and telling us you help us health-wise, I feel slighted, for better want of expression, because I'm also aware that a majority of the doctors in the United States are even from, okay, let me not say majority, a significant number of doctors in the United States are Nigerians or are from Africa. So who is actually helping who? So to hit the nail on the head, I think the partnership should be more about exploring the capacity that we have on ground and the capabilities that we have on ground and building trade-centeredness around that capacity. Because if you really ask me, I think we have the capacity to take care of ourselves. It's just that we do not have the will in terms of leadership to focus on that capacity and to bring us to the promised land. And I'm sure we'll get there soon.
Let me interrogate that aspect of Africa having the capacity to help themselves. Now, in the aspect of treatment, is that what you're referring to, or in the aspect of providing the drugs and developing the pharmaceutical industry? Because over the years, the dependence for the production of drugs has been on the West. It's just that we have some local companies that manufacture some of these drugs, but not as much as them. Do you think that African countries have the capacity to take care of themselves in terms of drug manufacturing?
All right. If you had a farm in your backyard and I came around in that same area to develop another farm, and that farm and that business has been in your family for about 100 years, and you see me as a threat coming to that vicinity to start up that kind of business, how would you feel? So the point is, the capacity, I reiterate, is there. But we have been made to feel, it's about mental colonization. We have been made to feel that we do not have the capacity. If we do not have the capacity, how come some of the best neurosurgeons in the world are Nigerians or Africans? How come we keep having some of these inventions taken away from Africa, taken to the West, and they are patented in the West and brought back to Nigeria and brought back to Africa and are sold to us? I want to be straight on and factual with you on these issues, okay? Are we developing the capacity? No. Are we relying on the capacity? No. Of course, how can we rely on the capacity? When our leaders, for every small headache they have, run out of the country or run out of Africa to go and seek treatment abroad. And so they themselves are facilitating, are encouraging medical tourism. But the capacity is here. I know the capacity is here. I have been a beneficiary of this capacity. But do we have the symbolic capital to put our trust, to invest in that capacity? And the West knows we do. And that is why you see the statements, because I listened to some part of the speech and some of the reportage on the visit of Secretary Brinkley. The statement, the narrative has changed. And the emphasis now is not what we can do for Africa. The emphasis now is what we can do with Africa, which is suggestive that Africa has some capacity, Africa has some capability, Africa has competencies that the West can no longer ignore.
Now let's look at the power play, going on in the global space. When he visited Nigeria, he was trying to pitch United States as the best business partner for Africa. Here you have Russia, who is also seeking to gain influence in Africa. You're aware of the activities of the Wagner groups in Africa, some of the countries where you have coup and all that. Here, on the other hand, you also have China, who is also seeking to strengthen its influence in Africa. How will this turn out for Africa, and what may likely be the effect of these on the economy of Africa and perhaps extension to Nigeria?
The first thing I'll say is that the merrier, or the more, the merrier. The more we have people that are dancing to the tune of Africa, the more we have suitors, as it were. You know, as Africa is Africa has always been the beautiful bride. But we've always been the exploited bride. We've always been the bride that seems not to be a lover of our people, or that seems to have a low level of awareness of the endowment, you know, that the universe has given to us, or shall I say the creator, shall I say nature has actually given to us. Now, away from that, it is a big economic or socioeconomic issue with respect to this so many Western and Eastern bloc suitors coming to see how they can lay their stake, you know, in Africa. And my research and my reading over the years shows that about 50% of African countries actually did gain independence between 1960 and 1970. But I can tell you that just 1% of all of these 48 to 50 African countries are actually free. In other words, we are being held by the vestiges and the chains of neo-colonialism. So whether it is a country or countries coming from the West, or whether it is a country or countries coming from the East, African leaders should sit down and establish the trail, establish the partnership proposals, and look out for the T's that have not been crossed and the I's that have not been dotted, that actually are predictive of neo-colonialistic or neo-colonialism tendencies, as it were. Let's open up another situation. There's a concept called protectionism, market protectionism. If you claim that you want to do business with me, like I did allude to Ehe having, I hope I got the name right. Ehiche, yeah. Having a farm, and I'm coming in that same area, you know, close to her generational, you know, property or source of income, means of production, to also establish there. Now, if you have a market where you protect, protectionism, where it is globalization that opens up the maxim and the doctrine of free trade for all, free flow of goods, inflow and outflow. And yet, the goods that are coming from Africa, you are able to protect from coming into your market. How fair is that? So, my stand is for African countries to look at foreign countries that will not have this garrison of market protectionism, you know, around their own businesses. The major problem that we've had in Africa is that most of the trade decisions, most of the trade clauses have not been fair to Africa. So whosoever is coming should come with fair, open, you know, and a symbiotic partnership that makes for growth, makes for development for everybody. So I'm not going to lay a stake on saying this is one best country, this is what everybody should come and offer something, but everybody should not be accepted on the basis of what they're offering. We must scrutinize what they're offering. You take a look at what has happened in Nigeria. At the age of 15, I was in Ajaokuta. My father was serving in that area at the age of 15. And at that age, I was sensitive enough to be able to see the monumental waste and cannibalization of wealth, the degeneration of infrastructure that was happening in Ajaokuta, and which persons, which people were responsible for that. It wasn't actually Nigerians, it was some foreign nationals that were doing that. So we must scrutinize everything that is coming in, and we must ensure that it is in the best interest for Africa and in the best interest for Nigeria.
Okay, looking at what is in the best interest for Africa, when countries that are already superpowers are coming, whether from the East or from the West, you have recommended that African leaders should scrutinize properly. But when they go to seek loans, when African countries go to seek loans, it's like in that way you were now the beggar or you're the one seeking something. Is it still possible to scrutinize properly the conditions attached to these loans? There may be some form of colonization again.
Yeah, it is actually some form of neo-colonization, no doubt about that. Well, the issue of loans, aids, and grants is one that I became aware of in my first year in the university studying sociology before I pivoted, to business management and strategy, as it were. And as an undergraduate sociologist, the consciousness was raised when you took courses in, the theories of underdevelopment. And you now began to realize, why is Africa actually underdeveloped? If Africa is said to be the richest continent on the earth, endowed with gigantic, humongous human, mineral, and natural resources, do we have any business being poor? All right? I read somewhere, and I'm not too sure, and I don't want to be quoted, I stand to be corrected, that the Nigerian representative at the recent World Economic Forum in Davos went out there and said, look, very soon, you people will be coming to Nigeria to take loans. Nigeria will be giving loans out. I'm not going to mention who I read said that. But the fact is that that should actually be the situation. Because in the 70s, when there was the oil boom, when we had so much, that the then head of state said, the problem with Nigeria is not that we don't have money. The problem is actually what to do with money. I read somewhere in history too, that Nigeria helped some African countries to deal with some financial issues, paid salaries that were, being owed by some African countries. We can help ourselves. Let's come back to the emphasis of what you have raised. Loans, aids, and grants. These are traps. Because for the most part, when we go out to get these loans, when we go out to sometimes receive this aid and receive these grants, we shouldn't be asking for grants. We should do what China did. And what did China do? Some 40, 50 years ago, China locked up itself. China selected the most brilliant, intelligent in their midst amongst their people and sent them abroad for education and ensured that they came back. And they started rebuilding the economy and became or have become not just a manufacturing hub, but a technological leader in the world today. So you hit it right on the head. Loans are traps. They are conundrums that perpetuate neocolonialism. And we shouldn't, as Africa, if we must look at getting loans, we should be borrowing from one another. Nigeria is rich enough to give out loans, if well managed, to other African countries when they need them, if those African countries are capable of paying back. Nigeria is rich enough to give out grants. All right, South Africa is rich enough to give out loans, to give out grants. We can actually help us. And that's why we have things like the African Development Bank, which is doing a lot. I mean, Nigeria, I think, recently got about $3 billion from the African Development Bank. We should have more of such infrastructure, soft access, to African countries, so that we can be the helpers of ourselves and not be dependent on external bodies or on the Bretton Woods institutions that will give us loans and will not tell us, some of the chains and some of the traps or the entrapments that are set about these loans. And then most painfully and most pathetically is when they ask us to come and we go and start begging for debt forgiveness.
All right. Part of the concerns raised by Blinken has to be the wave of coup you had in some African countries, which took place last year. You have Mali and Burkina Faso. Now, if you look at the sentiment driving this coup, you realize that there's also concern about the overbearance from the Western Bloc. How do you see this playing out, and what should be the narrative for Africa now that Africa needs to take its place in the global space?
All right, I need to take a deep breath before I talk about that, because it is important to have freedom of speech, but most importantly, there should be freedom after speech. So let me take a deep breath again. I'm not a supporter of coups, not especially with the level or the stage of evolution that we found ourselves as a continent. But again, as a sociologist come business administrator, business management scholar and expert, we were taught to scrutinize issues by asking the question, why? Why all of a sudden, after some 10, 15 years of stability especially in the West African region. All of a sudden, I'm sure you are aware that a little under 3-4 days ago, in another West African country, about 6 or 7 officers were sentenced to death by hanging for attempting a coup in that country that has also had democratic stability in the last 20 to 25 years or thereabouts. Why? Coups are social responses to degrading situations that are perpetuated either by internal forces or by external forces. Simple. It was after the emergence of these coups, which I do not support, that I personally, having lived for almost 50 years in the continent, born on the continent, buttered on the continent, been battered in the same continent, that I realized that a particular superpower, I'm not going to mention their names so that they don't maybe deny me visa next I go to the embassy, the kind of agreements that they had with these countries was dehumanizing. How do you have an agreement where you say, for instance, that out of 100% of the income that you generate from the sale of your natural resources, 90 or 80% must be domiciled in a colonial master's bank? And you still ask the same country to still come and borrow money that is meant for them. How do you, for instance, limit a particular country, a self-governing country, to say, look, we should have the first right of refusal when it comes to your resources? If you want to have anybody coming into your country to invest, the companies must be companies that are originating from we, the superpower. I mean, what should be the response to that by young African intellectuals who have been schooled in some of these foreign states and who see that these states are not actually as wealthy as they claim? Their wealth is being furnished, it's been garnished, it's been maintained, it's been sustained by the wealth and resources from Africa. That is the bit I'm going to talk about coups. Is it the best response? No. But what alternatives are there? I think we should be looking at the alternatives as we go on in the conversation.
Yeah, we wish we had more time to have more of that conversation, but we'll find another time to expand on it. But thank you very much, Dr. Kenny Kewa, for being our guest this morning, looking at economic implications of the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And we thank you so much for your wonderful submissions. Hopefully, we'll have you here again next time.
I'll always be here whenever you want me.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And that's it on the segment. Let's go on a quick break. When we return, it will be time to look at fiscal responsibility.
My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist and, television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timmy Dakolo, and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News. For everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news, Souq News is your station.
The National Theatre, Igomu, built during the military regime of Olusegun Obasanjo and finished in the time for the Second World Festival of Black Arts and Culture, FESTAC, in 1977. The theatre holds amazing treasures and memories. The artworks fill everyone with pride. The National Arts Theatre is visible from the motorway which connects Lagos Island and the mainland. The National Theatre is packed with the artworks of legendary contemporary Nigerian artists, stained glass walls by Yusuf Grillo, sculptures and murals by Lamidi Fakeye, Erabo Emopai, and many others. It was put to full use for a month as one of the 4 venues of the Second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture, tagged Festac 77. The complex hosted 16,000 participants from 56 African countries and the diaspora in an unprecedented showcase of African music, fine art, literature, drama, dance, and religion. The National Art Theatre was built and designed by Techno Expert Stroll, a Bulgarian company, mirroring the Palace of Culture and Sports in Varna, Bulgaria. Completed in 1976, the building is one of the largest and most beautiful of its kind on the African continent. It consists of a central hall with 5,000 seats, a collapsible stage that can be quickly rebuilt, a conference hall with 1,600 seats, 2 large exhibition halls, and 2 cinemas with 800 seats each. The theatre complex has a dressing room for artists, a garage, offices, coffee bars, and a buffet. It has indoor TV and radio systems, as well as booths with facilities for simultaneous translation of languages and hectares of large green lawn around. The majestic structure sits in Igomu like a quiet mountain, mesmerizing visitors and passers-by. The National Theatre, Souq Enlightenment.
Morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
It's a national orientation agency. It's, as far as I'm concerned, very idle and unprofessional.
If government says that subsidy is not in oil and government is not supposed to be paying subsidy in oil,
energy or whatever kind of oil solution we will be looking at.
Today we are conducting mining today. Solid minerals, as an example, is, in no disrespect to anybody, is abysmal. We definitely need improvements in those areas. Of course, there are infrastructural needs.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's been interesting for us to look at the business relations that exist between U.S. and Africa and why Africa has been of interest to U.S. That was what we talked about. And now we want to look at the need for proper accountability when it comes to public revenue and management, which was the thrust of the training the African Development Center, had in collaboration with the Fiscal Responsibility Commission this week. It was a 1-week training where executives and public officers were present, and it was a crucial training where they were trained in the act of public revenue, what they need to do, some of the do's and don'ts that they need to do when it comes to the issue of public revenue were talked about. We're going to take a report now that will capture all that happened during that training, and that will take place now. Stay with us.
The Fiscal Responsibility Commission, FRC, in collaboration with Africa Development Studies Center, ADSC, organized a 1-week service-wide strategic training with the theme Enhancing Public Revenue and Expenditure Management, starting on the 22nd of January 2024 at Watercrest Hotel, Awolowo Road, Ikeja, Lagos. The opening kicked off with a patriotic rendition of the national anthem led by Asheda Emmanuel, setting the tone for a week of commitment and learning. Victor Murako, Executive Chairman CEO of FRC, delivered the opening remarks, acknowledging the presence of distinguished guests, including the presence of the Chief Executive Director, ADSC, Ambassador Victor Walsh Oluwafemi, facilitators and representatives from various MDAs, while he highlighted the critical need for the training. Top managers and officials from Nigerian ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs, who came for this intensive 5-day workshop aimed at bolstering their skills in managing public finances, shared their thought with Souq News.
The reason why we're here is to broaden our knowledge on the enhancing the strategy of managing our revenue base as a country and also improving on our expenditure spending habits so that we have surplus, we'll not be borrowing all the time. And it has become our norms in this country that we believe in borrowing, and it's not taking us to any place because it is the right time, the present government in place Their end bent is reforming the economy so that it will benefit every Nigerian, both at home and those in the diaspora.
We are here to learn on an improvement on what we are already doing as it relates to revenue generation. We should not lose hope. There is no better place than Nigeria.
Well, as you know, this is a training on revenue generation and fund management for the government. I hope to gain more knowledge on how to manage these funds and how do we get more revenue in our organizations. We are not really revenue generating company, but for the fact that we have obligation to run, we have mandate to run, so we need to know, we need ideas to get how to generate more revenue for the government, for the company, and for the government entirely.
Other activities include training sessions, puzzle of assumption introduced by the moderator and Vice President of ADSC, Idausa Osamazi, and more interview with some key players presented at the event.
Nigerian Council of Food Science and Technology, we are just new, and I have a whole lot to gain because we are just starting to charge professionals on paying for their licenses, and that means a lot. So I'm here to understand how to manage the revenue that we're going to get from the food professionals.
We have had several capacity building and trainings of this sort with them, and so I can't think of any agency that will feign ignorance of the provisions of the Act today. And then we also collaborate with the National Assembly in ensuring that agencies comply with the obligations, as they are, invited to the National Assembly to come and make their report or give their report, the report of the annual audited accounts or the performance of their budget and so on. We sit in with them. They have to come to us, to show us evidence of remittances that they made to government and all that. So with that, compliance has actually increased, I can say.
The vision I have as the Director General of the agency, the only federal government agency mandated to ensure that natural medicine or indigenous medicine develops in the country, is that in the next 2 to 3 years, we will become confident enough as a people, to start believing in ourselves and believing in our own, and agree that as a people and as a nation, we will develop our own natural medicine to the extent that there's locally available products that our people can use. They are durable, they are safe, they are available, they are accessible, and we not only have them to use, but that we can also export them.
Participants are optimistic about this gathering as it marks a significant step towards equipping officers of public finance management in order to navigate the complexities of Nigeria's economy. Grace Komolafe, Souq News.
All right, now to give us a better perspective and overview of the activity of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission and then the need for fiscal responsibility in government, we're being joined by Chris Nwaduka, who is the Special Advisor to the Executive Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission. He joins us from Abuja. Chris, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right, it's our pleasure to be your host this morning. Now, let's start this conversation by you giving us a background information into the mandate given to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission and some of your oversight functions. Maybe that could be the starting point for us. Just give us a background, an overview of these oversight functions and some of the mandates given to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission.
Thank you. I'll keep it simple, using what we call a grammar daisy rule, such that even a grandma that's 92 years that didn't go to school will understand it. I'll try to do that. Basically, the Fiscal Responsibility Commission is established by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 for the purpose of promoting accountability in fiscal issues, promoting transparency. Accountability means when you do something regarding revenue, regarding expenditure in government, the federal government particularly, you give your report duly and timeously. Transparency means let it be open and accessible to citizens and to other stakeholders. The Fiscal Responsibility Commission also has a responsibility or a function to promote prudence in the management of the nation's resources. Prudence means use it in such a way that it makes sense, basically, street bus stop language. Relate to the nation's resources, manage the nation's resources in a way that you think of the generations to come. Take best decisions as they will, not selfish decisions. The Commission also has a responsibility to ensure that the management of the nation's resources, the budgeting system is streamlined, is predictable, is understandable, so that the man on the street will know what is, to which application his money, public's money is being put, and will also understand his responsibility towards contributing his own bit towards the revenue of the nation, as it were. There is another responsibility that is not often spoken about of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. That is to ensure that economic decisions are aligned with the economic objectives of the nation set out in Section 16 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 Constitution, as amended, which is to say, if we are budgeting, if we are expending or spending government resources, if we are discussing, if we are reporting, if we are applying ourselves towards fiscal issues, economic issues generally, including monetary issues, because there are also economic issues, we must keep our eyes on the ball. And the ball in this event is the welfare of the citizen on the street, Section 16 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So the commission was established by the Act in 2007, started activities 2008, 2009. Since then, we've taken very seriously part of what we did in the training that you just spoke about, which is to a responsibility to disseminate good practices among practitioners. So what we did at the event, if you permit me to run a bit ahead, it's possibly in your question sequence, but if you permit me to run ahead, what we did was to, in collaboration with ADAC, get together those who implement and those who plan the budget and the expenditure framework and the sector strategies, basically those who plan the fiscal management documents, and speak to them on enhancing the revenues of government, their own responsibilities, as well as the wider picture, and improve spending efficiency. Thank you.
Okay, let's look further now into the training that was held in partnership with African Development Studies Center, the Fiscal Responsibility Commission coming into partnership with them. Now, before this time, there have been talks about prudent management of the nation's resources, but why heighten the conversation at this point, and why look specifically at enhancing revenue generation and expenditure management?
You may have heard that Nigeria has been borrowing. I heard somebody speaking on your program before I came on about loans and loans and loans, and the nation needs to begin to think of other sources outside loans for funding its deficit. Well, I guess you've heard that Nigeria's problem is Nigeria has a huge revenue problem, which is to say the government needs money. Individuals are doing well. Yeah, the GDP is the highest in Africa. but incidentally, government revenue, when you compare it to the GDP, it's not panning out well like other countries in Africa. To put it again in grandma's language, it's like you have citizens. It's true our citizens are not very fabulously rich, but the nation itself is rich because it has the highest GDP in Africa. And GDP means the sum of final economic activities, final goods and services produced in a country, less the exports within a period of 1 year. So all the economic activities, legitimate, recognized economic activities that take place in Nigeria within a period of 1 year is greater in value than what takes place in South Africa, which is number 2, what takes place in Egypt, what takes place in, of course, Ghana, Gambia, and so on and so forth. So to that extent, Nigeria is rich, yeah. Nigeria is rich to that extent, number 1 GDP in Africa. But now the curiosity or the downside of that is that the government itself in these other countries get more revenue out of all these activities of its citizens and government than Nigeria does. So it's become necessary for government to encourage its citizens to see this as a challenge that needs to be solved. Government revenue needs to go up. Year after year, we've seen government budgets and having a deficit, you know, and deficit means government is spending more than is coming in. Why is government spending more than is coming in? Because there are projects that need to be done. There are expenses, there are mandatory, as it were, expenses that the government must meet. Government must pay salaries, federal government must pay salaries of its workers. This is not discretionary. Government must pay debts that is owing before it's due. This is non-discretionary. Then the money that is left, you now determine how do we apportion it amongst projects. Some are developmental projects, some are basic overhead projects for running the government. And by the time government does that over the years, it finds itself needing to spend more than it's getting in its is going to get in its estimation consistently. So that's called a deficit. We've carried this deficit over and over. Each year there's a deficit. And the challenge or a characteristic of deficit is that there has got to be a deficit financing. It's got to be financed. And money has to come from somewhere. And the place is going to be financed from, one of the places is debt. You need to borrow in order to do the work. So the thought has come that, look, let's look at generating more revenue that is legitimately due government so that we can fund the budget, whether fund the deficit or basically fund our expenditure plans. And that's the essence of what we came to do. It's become critical. We know there has been talk about, okay, fine, let's improve revenue to GDP. That's what it's called. That's the revenue ratio of government revenue versus the total value of total legitimate activities that go on within the country in a year, so that we can reduce debt, reduce the need for borrowing. So I hope that addresses it.
All right. Now, I would like you to give us insight into some of the rules, or if I may say, do's and don'ts guiding, public revenue and expenditure as provided in the provision that, guides the activities of the Commission. What are some of these rules, some of these do's and don'ts that has to be imbibed when it comes to the management of public funds and the issue of expenditure?
Okay, let me start from the idea of rules in the first place. You have two options when it comes to spending your money. You spend using best of judgment, which is what Nigeria used to do. Let's get the best people, let's trust them, let them spend our money. Let's trust that they are guiding us the right way. The other option is to set guardrails, like somebody climbing a staircase and you put guardrails. Don't trust that these guys will fall off. Don't trust that a child will not be given the power to make decisions for us. So let's build guardrails, as it were. So what fiscal responsibility are, before fiscal responsibility, we had people running the economic decision based on best of judgment, basically, also based on certain regulations, but never was there a statutorily or legally or a legal instrument that backed those decisions or guided the decisions. We just trusted people, the system trusted people and believed that they would do well. But by early 2000s, we had found ourselves in a pit economically and debt-wise. So part of fiscal responsibility engagement was to set rules. Part of that rule is that, hey, you can spend more than, or well, in the event that you plan to spend more than your revenue, you must not spend more than 3% of the GDP, you know? So that put a cap of budget deficit on 3% of GDP. It's true that in recent years, a proviso came in to water down a bit, say, look, you can exceed 3% of GDP if there are extenuating circumstances, but still technically it's 3% of GDP that is a guide. So that is one limit. So government is not free to go and borrow thy kingdom come. That's one rule. Then secondly, that's at the big picture level. At the functional level, which is ministries, departments, and agencies of government, they are told that we now tell them through the functionality of the Act and the Finance Act as well, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Finance Act, as well as circulars and other regulations, that there is also a limit to what you can do with the revenue that comes into your coffers. Before the advent of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, ministries, departments, and agencies, we are allowed to spend the revenues that they generate. But with the advent of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Section 22, I believe, now limited what an agency or a department can spend. It now said, at the end of the year, audit your financial records, and whatever is the excess of revenue over the expenditures you had, you will now keep 20% of it, and you must 80% of it back to the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government. That was a novel addition into the income stream of the federal government. Don't spend all that you have. So that's another rule, that's another ceiling, that's another cap. Keep only 20%, revert 80% into the basket, as it were. So the federal government can have money the next year for doing its business. Then that has been on, and after a while, can you still hear me, please?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's been also moderated a bit, because ministries, departments, and agencies have now, by certain recent circular, been reclassified into three. Some are fully funded by the government. If the government gives you all your money to run your business, to pay your salaries, to buy equipment, that's for your capital, for your overhead, for your personnel, then by Jove, any revenue that comes your way, be it a penny, be it a trillion, let it go back to government, because you've already made a budget. Your budget has been entirely accommodated to the best possible extent of the government in the financial year's budget, and you're given that money according to the financial rules and existing circulars. So any money that comes your way, you should not spend it because it's not in the budget. Revert 100% of it to the coffers of the federal government. This is the adjustment made to that regulation, because the initial regulation in any case just had to do with what we call scheduled corporations. There are corporations that are in the schedule to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Then there's a second category, those who are partially funded by the budget. That is to say, possibly the federal government pays their salaries, takes care of their overheads, but they take care of their capital outlays. So for those other agencies, whatever revenue that comes in, they need to immediately send 50% of it. Immediately as revenue is coming in, let 50% of it go back to the federal government. And the rest 50% of it, there is a directive for treating it. Then there are those who are fully funded, who are self-funded. There are agencies of government that exist and transact on the revenues they raise, and they do business themselves. The government does not extraneously put money into their budget. It's from the businesses that they do, as it were, if you permit the term business, that they raise their own money. Those ones are not permitted to keep 100% of the money of the excess they raise, of the money they raise either. So there's this categorization. There are three categories. We needed these events to drill it down to the operators, because the people we spoke with are the people in audit, the people in finance, the people who are the players in the money system of the federal government. We needed them to understand their space. We also needed them to understand the logic of the federal government in doing what it's doing. That logic is that independent revenue, the revenue coming from internally generated sources of ministry, departments, and agencies, as well as what we call operating surplus. That's that 80% of the surplus of NDAs. It has become an important component in the budget mix of the federal government. It used to be
economic decisions align with the economic objectives of the nation. Now, looking at the budgets of various ministries and agencies in 2024, in your assessment, does it quite align with the economic objectives of the country? Because expenditure is also as important as revenue, what you put the money into. How does the Commission ensure that the expenditure are what would translate into development in line with the economic objectives of the nation?
Thank you. Like you said, expenditures are also as important as revenue. As a matter of fact, expenditures may just be more important than revenue, because expenditures are the route by which the agenda of the government is given life. It's the expenditure that we use to make possible the renewed hope agenda, for instance. Yeah, as to the question regarding does the 2024 budget align appropriately with Section 16 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? I will say yes. In the first place, there is a budget, so that's a good one. There was a clear process for producing that budget. There was a sector strategy that was thought through. There's a fiscal strategy paper that tried to look at the next 3 years and look at what the priorities should be, look at what the objectives of the fiscal objectives should be regarding employment, regarding inflation, regarding economic growth, and so on and so forth. And there was also now envelopes, ministries contributed, the ministries contributed their projects. I believe those projects align with the National Development Plan, which is a more overarching plan that's leading Nigeria somewhere. I also believe that they had, since there are ministers from the ruling government, they also aligned with the renewed hope agenda. Yes, they did. And it also now went to the National Assembly for appropriate, those were suggestions as it were, those were proposals to the National Assembly. It's called budget proposal. The National Assembly also interrogated the documents. At the National Assembly, being representatives of the people, carrying the mandate of the people, they looked at that alignment, or they were supposed to look at it. Yeah, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, do you agree 100% that all the items align fully and completely with Section 16? I don't think so. There are items in the budget that left to us as an independent fiscal analyst, we could say, look, this should have gone here, this should have gone there. But so far, the process is running. Like I keep saying, I keep quoting Martin Luther King, who says, we are not yet where we want to be, but thank God we are not where we used to be. There was a time in this country where budgets probably were pulled from the moon. They could have been pulled from anywhere. You know, the people were not consulted. There was no pretense as to a process that involved the people, so on. So far, we're making progress. Yeah, I would say so.
All right, thank you very much for talking with us this morning, Chris Uwaduka, who is the Special Advisor to the Executive Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, with the hope that with this training, the participants from the various ministries, departments and agencies, most of them MDs, most of them CEOs of the agencies, will go back and implement all that they've learned now, and we will see a better public service with better fiscal management, and that would translate to development for the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Femi, what's your take?
You know, I like the word, the sense of responsibility. You know, the essence of a commission like this is to enhance fiscal responsibility in government, to ensure that public office holders, they do what, not just what is expected, but professionally provided according to the provision guiding, you know, their activities. You've had instances where some public office holders, they engage in professional misconduct when it comes to the usual management of revenue and expenditure. But with this kind of training, you know, it's an avenue for public officers to understand what they need to do. There are references to cases of, several cases where you have public officers being found performing below performance as a result of they don't have a proper understanding of the rules guiding their expenditure. But with this kind of training and having a partnership with a strategic center like the African Development Study Center is very strategic. So this kind of training, yeah, we should continue with it for CEOs, you know, public office holders to understand what is expected and to create that sense of responsibility, which is very crucial.
I hope to see the expected outcome becoming very visible in the shortest of time. Thank you very much for watching today's edition of Early Exchange. It's the last for this week. We thank you for being with us all through the week. We ask that you give us your time again, beginning from Monday, 8 a.m. West African time. And that is not to say that Souq News is shutting down. There are other programs that you can watch. Market Insight comes up at 11 a.m. here in Souq News. There will be sports also at noon, and so many other programs. There will also be news updates. I am Blessing AJ. Do enjoy your weekend.
And don't forget, you can do a catch-up of this conversation by going on our YouTube page and our social media platform. And from me to you, develop a sense of responsibility in everything you do. Don't forget, Early Exchange returns on Monday. I am Femi Ayodele. I hand over to Grace now, who's going to take the news update. Bye for now.
My name is Olatunji Shotimirin. I'm a performing artist and, television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timidakolo and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News for everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news. Souq News is your station.
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godi Odidi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for? And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching Souq News.